Every Halloween, our little town hosts a bonfire in the center of the woods. It's a tradition older than any of us, going back generations. My grandfather used to say it was a way to burn away the darkness and keep evil spirits at bay. But I never quite believed him until last year. It started the same as every year. The air was crisp, the trees shivering in the wind, and the scent of burning would fill the night. Families gathered, holding steaming mugs of cider. Kids ran around in their costumes, and the town mayor, Mr. Gillis, stood at the center, grinning as he lit the first match. As the flames sparked and danced, I felt a shiver crawl down my spine, a cold sensation that had nothing to do with the chill in the air. The fire grew faster than usual, like it had a life of its own, reaching hungrily for the sky. Sparks shot up like fireworks, and shadows stretched and twisted around us. That's when I saw them, faces flickering in the fire. At first, I thought it was just an illusion, the way the flames can trick your eyes. But then I recognized one. It was Mr. Kearns, the old librarian who disappeared a few years back. His face was there, clear as day, his eyes wide and terrified. I blinked, and he was gone. I turned to my friend Kara, standing beside me, to ask if she saw it too. But before I could speak, the flames surged higher, and the crowd let out a collective gasp. A gust of wind roared through the clearing, and for a moment, the fire split apart, revealing the blackened ground beneath. And there, crouched in the dirt, was something I'll never forget. A figure, wrapped in shadow, was clawing its way up from the earth. Its eyes glowed like embers, and its grin stretched too wide, showing rows of jagged teeth. It reached toward the crowd, its long fingers dripping with darkness. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, but the others didn't seem to notice. They were frozen, staring blankly at the fire, as if entranced. Mr. Gillis kept smiling, but his eyes had gone glassy, and the flames reflected something terrible in them, something hungry. I grabbed Kara's arm, whispering, "Do you see that?" But she didn't respond. She just stood there, her eyes locked on the fire. I shook her, but she was as still as a statue. That's when I noticed her shadow. It wasn't right. It was twisting and writhing, like it was struggling to break free from her body. Before I could react, the flames surged again, swallowing the figure in the fire. The wind howled, and the fire roared, its light burning brighter than ever before. The shadows around us stretched and pulled, dancing faster, and then, just as quickly as it came, the figure vanished, and everything went still. I let go of Kara's arm, feeling the weight of the silence around me. The fire crackled gently now, its flames calm, almost peaceful. But I knew something was wrong. People were starting to stir, rubbing their eyes, as if they were waking from a dream. But a quick head count revealed what I feared most. 2 people were missing. Kara was one of them. I spun around, searching frantically for Kara. The bonfire's flames flickered in my eyes, casting long, eerie shadows across the crowd. The air was thick, like it was holding its breath. People were murmuring now, uneasy whispers passing through the crowd as they noticed Kara and another resident, Mr. Holt, had vanished. But I felt it. Something darker was creeping into our town. The fire had taken them. The ground beneath my feet felt strange, like it was vibrating, pulsing with life. I could hear the crackling of the flames, but beneath that, there was another sound, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. My skin crawled, and every instinct screamed at me to run, to get away from the fire. But I stayed, feet rooted to the spot, as if some unseen force was holding me in place. Then the flames shifted again. The bonfire split open like a mouth yawning wide, and from within, a whispering hiss emerged. It snaked through the crowd, sliding into our ears, wrapping around our minds. I felt the chill of it slither down my spine. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. It was like 100 voices, layered together, all speaking at once. Confess, or be consumed. I looked around, and the others were reacting, some shaking their heads, some clutching their ears as if trying to block out the whispers. But it was useless. The sound drilled into my skull, pulling at my thoughts, dragging old memories to the surface. Memories I didn't want to see. Flashes of moments I'd buried deep came flooding back. I saw myself, 10 years old, pushing my younger cousin into the river when no one was looking. The way he splashed and flailed, and how I ran away, hiding the guilt like a dark secret. The whispering has pulled at it, wrapping around the memory and dragging it up, showing it to me as if it were happening all over again. I could feel the icy water, the terror in his eyes. I staggered back, almost losing my balance. And then I saw it, Kara's face in the fire again. But it was different this time. She was screaming, her eyes wide with horror. Her mouth moved, but the flames swallowed her words, twisting them into smoke. She was reaching out, her hand extending from the flames, clawing at the air like she was trying to pull herself free. But behind her, dark tendrils of shadow wrapped around her wrists, yanking her back into the depths of the fire. She vanished again, and the flames flared bright enough to turn the night into day. I heard someone shout, "It's not real. None of this is real." It was Mr. Gillis, but his face was pale, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. He stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the fire pit. As he hit the ground, the shadows surged out from the flames, reaching for him like skeletal hands. He screamed as they wrapped around his legs, pulling him in. His hands clawed at the dirt, but the ground beneath him seemed to soften, swallowing his fingers like quicksand. I rushed forward without thinking, grabbing his arm. But the moment my skin touched his, I felt it, the darkness pouring into me, flooding my veins like ice. I could feel his secrets, his fear. He'd done terrible things, embezzling from the town's funds, paying off people to keep quiet about some land deal that had gone wrong, and worse things I could barely comprehend. His sins weighed on me like 1,000 pounds, and the fire whispered again, "Confess, or be consumed." I let go, stumbling back, and he was gone, dragged into the fire. His scream echoed through the clearing, and then it was silent again. Too silent. The townspeople were no longer just whispering. They were panicking, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear as they huddled together. They had seen what I'd seen. They knew the fire was demanding something, and it wasn't going to stop. It was hungry for secrets, for darkness, and it was growing stronger with every soul it claimed. I wanted to run, to bolt into the woods and get as far away from the flames as possible, but my feet wouldn't move. It was like the fire had cast its spell on me, and every time I tried to take a step, I felt the pull of the earth beneath me, holding me down. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something move, a shadow darting between the trees, just beyond the edge of the firelight. It was fast, too fast to be one of the townsfolk. I squinted, trying to make it out, but it was like the darkness itself had come alive, twisting and shifting just beyond the glow of the flames. And that's when I realized the shadows weren't just in the fire. They were all around us. As the crowd backed away from the bonfire, a cold wind whipped through the clearing, and I could feel eyes on me, dozens of them, hidden in the darkness. Whispers rose again, this time all around, weaving through the trees like the wind was speaking. Your sins, your secrets, your souls. I knew then that the bonfire wasn't the only threat. Whatever was out there in the woods, whatever lurked in the shadows, was closing in, and it was hungry. The fire's whispers grew louder, merging with the howl of the wind and the frantic muttering of the crowd. The whole clearing felt alive, thrumming with an unnatural energy that made my skin prickle. I knew, deep down, that whatever was happening wasn't going to end until the bonfire had fed on every secret, every sin it could claim. The flames roared, sending sparks into the air like ravenous fireflies, and I realized with a sinking feeling that there was no way out of this unless we faced it head on. I took a step back, trying to get my bearings, when a piercing scream ripped through the night. It was coming from the woods, echoing off the trees. Everyone turned, faces pale, eyes wide. The scream was high-pitched and desperate, like someone was in unimaginable pain. For a split second, I thought it was Kara, but then I saw him, Tommy, the high school dropout who had disappeared a few years ago. His face was lit by the fire as he stumbled out of the woods, his clothes torn, and his eyes wild with terror. He was pointing frantically, his hands shaking. "The shadows, don't let them touch you," he shouted, but before he could say anything else, one of those dark tendrils shot out from the trees, wrapping around his ankle. Tommy screamed as it yanked him backward, dragging him across the dirt. He clawed at the ground, leaving trails of blood as his nails tore from his fingers. A few people in the crowd screamed, turning to run, but it was like we were trapped in a nightmare. No matter which way anyone went, the shadows moved faster, darting out from the trees and grabbing anyone who strayed too far. They pulled people into the darkness, their screams cutting off as soon as they were out of sight. The bonfire seemed to swell with every soul it claimed, burning hotter, brighter, and higher. Desperation clawed at me, and I spun around, trying to find a way out. But everywhere I looked, there were eyes staring back, gleaming red eyes that seemed to be watching, waiting for their moment to strike. The darkness was alive, shifting, and I realized with a sickening jolt that the shadows weren't just pulling people in, they were feeding off them. I could see them absorbing into the flames, the fire growing each time it swallowed a life. My heart raced as I tried to spot a way out. That's when I noticed the old path leading deeper into the woods. It was barely visible, hidden in the undergrowth, but it was there, an opening just wide enough to slip through. I grabbed a nearby stick and lit the end in the bonfire, making a torch. The fire hissed, almost as if it was angry at me for stealing even a piece of it. I shouted to the others, "This way! Follow me!" A few turned and ran toward me, eyes wide and pleading. One of them was Jenna, a girl I'd known since grade school. She grabbed my hand, her grip tight and desperate. "What's happening, Logan? Why is this happening?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, but we need to move." I pulled her along the path, and we sprinted deeper into the woods, the fire's glow fading behind us. The shadows hissed, stretching like black snakes toward us, but the torch seemed to hold them at bay. For a moment, I thought we might make it, but then the woods came alive. The trees groaned as their branches twisted and bent, forming a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The path ahead seemed to stretch, elongating like we were running in place. I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet, softening like the earth was turning into quicksand. Jenna's grip tightened, and I knew she was feeling it too. The forest itself was turning against us. Suddenly, something darted out from the underbrush, and I stumbled back, nearly dropping the torch. It was a deer, but its eyes were wrong, completely black, like twin voids. Its antlers were twisted and gnarled, dripping with some kind of dark, oily substance. It stared at us for a moment, unblinking, before its mouth split open, revealing rows of jagged, human-like teeth. It let out a shriek, so loud it felt like my eardrums were going to burst. Jenna screamed, pulling me back. "Run!" she cried, and we sprinted again, dodging through the trees as more animals emerged. Wolves with eyes like burning coals, birds with wings made of shadow, their feathers leaving trails of darkness in the air. They watched us, their gazes hungry, and I knew they weren't just animals. They were part of the curse, part of whatever ancient evil the town had unleashed with its secrets. We stumbled upon an old stone circle, overgrown with vines and moss, hidden deep in the woods. I could feel the power radiating from it, like the stones themselves were alive. The air was colder here, and the shadows seemed hesitant to cross the threshold. I pulled Jenna inside, the torch flickering as we both collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. She looked at me, eyes wide and fearful. "What is this place?" I don't know," I stammered. "But it feels safer." The stones felt ancient, pulsing with an energy that seemed to keep the shadows at bay. For the first time since the bonfire had roared to life, I felt like we had a chance. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure stood just outside the circle, its face obscured by shadows. Oiti Wolf Jada. She was pale, her eyes wide and blank, like she was in a trance. She didn't look at me, just stared past me, into the darkness. Kara, I shouted, but she didn't respond. She took a step closer, her movements slow and stiff, like she was being controlled. The shadows around her flickered, and I could see tendrils wrapping around her arms, pulling her forward. Jenna grabbed my arm. Logan, don't. She's not really there. I shook my head, not wanting to believe it. But then, the Kara in front of me slowly lifted her head, and her eyes locked onto mine. They weren't her eyes anymore. They were black, bottomless pits, filled with the same darkness that had swallowed so many others. The whispering started again, louder this time, and Kara's lips moved, forming the words, "Confess, or be consumed." The shadows surged, and the stones began to tremble beneath us. The circle that had felt safe now felt like a trap. And as the darkness closed in, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. The bonfire had called us, and it wanted to burn away every last secret, even if it had to consume us all to do it. The stones trembled beneath us, and the whispering grew louder, echoing off the trees like the voices of 1,000 souls. The shadows outside the circle rippled, almost eager to pounce, but the stones held them back, just barely. I could feel the energy pulsing through the ground, but it felt fragile, like a thin veil between us and the darkness creeping in from every direction. Kara stood just beyond the threshold, her eyes still those terrifying black voids. Her mouth twitched into a smile that wasn't hers, a grotesque, stretching grin that spread too wide, the corners of her lips cracking open as if something else was trying to claw its way out. The firelight flickered through the trees, casting her shadow across the circle, and I watched in horror as her shadow split into two, one that mimicked her movements, and another that twisted and warped, growing longer, its fingers stretching toward us like claws. Jenna clung to me, her nails digging into my arm. "Logan, we have to move. Now!" I nodded, my eyes locked on Kara's shadow as it writhed on the edge of the stone circle, its fingers inching closer with each passing second. The whispering voices grew louder, forming words that scratched at the back of my skull. "Confess. Confess." I felt a tug deep in my chest, as if the shadows were pulling at my soul, trying to pry loose the secrets I'd kept buried for years. Memories flashed through my mind, things I'd done, things I'd witnessed, things I should have stopped but didn't. I could feel the darkness trying to pull them out, to make me face what I'd hidden away. I fought against it, but the more I resisted, the stronger the pull became. The shadows around Kara surged, and she stepped closer. "Logan," she whispered, her voice layered with a dozen others, all speaking in unison. Tell them what you did." I stumbled back, almost tripping over a stone. "I don't know what you're talking about," I shouted, but I could feel the words faltering. Deep down, I knew there were things I had buried, things I swore I'd never tell. And the fire was feeding off those secrets. Jenna grabbed my face, forcing me to look at her. "Listen to me, Logan. It's not her. It's using her. It's using all of them." I tried to steady my breathing, focusing on her voice, the only thing keeping me anchored to reality. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling. She glanced around, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow. "We need to find the source. This circle, these stones, they're old, and they're barely holding back whatever's out there. But if we can find the heart of this, maybe we can stop it." I nodded, my heart pounding. "Okay, but how?" As if in answer, the ground beneath us shuddered, and one of the stones cracked open, splitting down the middle. A chill shot through me as a foul-smelling, black mist seeped from the crack, swirling around the circle like it was testing the boundaries. The shadows around Kara flickered, and she stepped back, merging into the darkness. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. Down, down. Follow the roots. I exchanged a look with Jenna, and we both crouched beside the cracked stone. Beneath it, we saw what looked like a tunnel, the roots of ancient trees curling and twisting downward, their tendrils slick with that same black ooze. It pulsed almost like it was alive. Jenna's hand tightened on mine. This is it. We have to go down. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to run, to escape the woods and never look back. But something deeper, the same pull that had drawn me into the bonfire's light, urged me forward. I nodded, and together, we crawled through the opening, the ground swallowing us as the stone sealed shut behind us with a deafening thud. The air was thick and damp, the smell of rot and earth overpowering as we descended. The tunnel walls seemed to breathe, the roots pulsating like veins in a living thing. Jenna lit her phone's flashlight, and the dim glow revealed carvings etched into the walls, symbols I didn't recognize, symbols that looked ancient and wrong, twisted beyond understanding. They seemed to move, shifting like they were trying to claw their way off the stone. The deeper we went, the louder the whispers became. They clawed at my mind, pulling me into memories I wanted to forget. I saw my cousin's face again, his eyes wide as he slipped beneath the water. I saw the way I'd run, leaving him behind. And then other memories, a girl I'd cheated on in high school, the money I'd stolen from my parents' drawer when I was 17, the fights I'd started. Each memory dragged at me, trying to pull me down, but I forced myself to keep moving, one hand on the roots for balance. Jenna's breathing quickened beside me. They're trying to make us confess, Logan. They want us to admit our sins. But why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She paused, her eyes flickering with realization. Because if we don't, the fire consumes us. It takes us as fuel. I shuddered. But if we do confess, before I could finish, a low growl echoed from the darkness ahead. The tunnel opened into a cavern, and in the center of it, surrounded by a tangle of roots and black ooze, was the heart of the bonfire. It wasn't just flames. It was a writhing mass of shadows, faces twisting and screaming as they melted into the inferno. I saw Mr. Gillis, Tommy, and countless others, their eyes wide with horror as the fire devoured them. And standing before the fire was Kara, or what was left of her. Her skin was blackened, cracked like burnt wood, and the shadows clung to her like a second skin. She turned to face us, her mouth stretching into that impossibly wide grin. "It's too late," she hissed. "It already knows your secrets." The shadows surged from the bonfire, snaking toward us. I grabbed Jenna's hand, pulling her back, but there was nowhere left to run. The shadows wrapped around our legs, dragging us toward the flames. The heat was unbearable, searing my skin as the fire's whispers filled my head. "Confess or burn," Jenna screamed, and in a moment of sheer panic, she shouted, "It was me. I started the fire last summer that burned down the school. It was my fault." The shadows around her hesitated, like they were drinking in her confession, savoring it. I felt the shadows tighten around me, and I knew my turn was coming. The flames called for my secrets, for the truth I'd buried deep. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "I let my cousin drown," I whispered. I was scared. I ran. The shadows paused, and for a moment, I thought they would let us go. But then, they tightened again, dragging us closer. The fire roared, and I realized with dawning horror that one confession wouldn't be enough. It wanted everything. As I screamed, the flames reached for me, and I felt the darkness pulling me in deeper and deeper. The fire pulled me closer, its heat so intense I could barely breathe. The shadows twisted around my legs, creeping up like vines, burning cold against my skin. My screams echoed through the cavern, mixing with the whispers that drilled into my skull, demanding more, demanding everything. Jenna's grip on my hand tightened, her face pale and tear-streaked. and I knew she was barely holding on too. The flames surged higher, the shadows hissing in excitement, and I realized that each confession we made only fed the fire, making it stronger. I could see it, feel it, pulsing in the dark. It was a hunger that would never be satisfied, no matter how much it consumed. And it wanted all of us. "Logan, we can't keep giving it what it wants," Jenna shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. "It's a trap." I nodded, feeling the panic rise in my throat. "But if we don't," I started, but the words were cut off as the shadows pulled us closer, our feet dragging across the dirt. I fought against the pull, every muscle straining, but it was like trying to pull free from quicksand. The darkness was alive, relentless. In the middle of the inferno, Kara's twisted form watched us, her eyes flickering with black flames. She lifted a hand, and the shadows obeyed, tightening their grip around Jenna's neck. Jenna choked, her eyes bulging as she clawed at the dark tendrils squeezing her throat. "Jenna!" I screamed, but it was useless. The shadows pulled her up, lifting her off the ground. Her feet kicked in the air as she struggled, her face turning a sickly shade of purple. I lunged forward, grabbing at her legs, but my hands passed through, the shadows burning like dry ice against my skin. It felt like my flesh was peeling away, but I didn't let go. Suddenly, a voice, low, ancient, and echoing from every direction, boomed through the cavern. It wasn't coming from the bonfire, or from Kara. It came from the earth itself, the roots beneath us, the air around us. "Enough!" The shadows froze. The fire sputtered, and the cavern walls trembled, sending cascades of dust and debris raining down. The voice was powerful, commanding, and for a moment, I felt the shadows hesitate, like they were afraid. Jenna dropped to the ground, gasping for breath. I pulled her close, feeling the tremors running through her body as we huddled together. The cavern fell into an eerie silence, the only sound the crackle of the fire, now dimmed, like it was afraid too. From the darkness, an enormous figure emerged. It was neither man nor beast, something in between, with the body of a twisted tree and eyes like pools of liquid night. Its arms were gnarled branches, each one tipped with sharp, claw-like roots that scraped the earth as it moved. The thing's mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth carved into its bark-like skin. It was the source, the heart of whatever curse had gripped the town for generations. The bonfire was our offering, our sacrifice to contain the darkness, it said, its voice shaking the very ground. "But you humans, your sins have grown too many. The fire can no longer hold it." I could barely speak, my mind reeling. "What? What are you?" It tilted its head, shadows spilling from its eyes like smoke. "I am the keeper of secrets. I am what you have buried beneath your homes, your hearts, your town. You thought fire could cleanse, but it only feeds. It only burns." Jenna and I exchanged a terrified glance. "How do we stop this?" she whispered, her voice barely holding steady. "There has to be a way." The keeper laughed, a sound like trees groaning under the weight of a storm. "There is no stopping it. Your town's sins have become the roots of its foundation. The more secrets you fed the fire, the more powerful it grew. And now, the darkness you tried to bury is waking." I felt a chill run through me as the shadows at our feet began to stir again, shifting like restless snakes. I pulled Jenna to her feet, backing away as the ground started to split open, revealing an abyss of darkness beneath us. The whole cavern was breaking apart, and above, the roots were thrashing, like they were tearing free of the earth itself. "We need to run," I said, but Jenna shook her head, her eyes locked on the keeper. "Wait, if the bonfire isn't enough, then what does it want?" she demanded. The keeper's eyes burned with a dark fire as it answered. "It wants truth, the deepest truth, the truth none of you have spoken for generations." The ground beneath us trembled harder, and the shadows swirled, rising into the air like a tornado. The fire surged, and I knew we were out of time. I grabbed Jenna's hand, pulling her back, We need to move now. But Jenna stood her ground, and then I saw it in her eyes, the realization. Logan, wait. It's not asking for our individual secrets. It's asking for the secret. The one that started all of this. I hesitated, fear and confusion mixing in my mind. What do you mean? She pointed at the carvings on the walls, those ancient symbols that writhed and twisted as if they were alive. The town's founders. They knew. They must have done something to trap the darkness here. We have to find out what they did. The shadows surged toward us, clawing at our legs. The bonfire's flames twisted higher, and Kara's face, no longer human, but a mask of ash and flame, screamed a warning that shook my bones. We're out of time, I yelled, pulling her toward the tunnel. But Jenna dug her heels in. Logan, if we don't face this now, it will never end. We have to confront the truth. I glanced back at the keeper, its eyes boring into me. And in that moment, I knew what it was demanding. The truth. The town's darkest secret. A memory flashed through my mind, my grandfather sitting by the fireplace, telling me stories when I was a kid. Stories of old pacts, of deals made in blood to protect the town. He'd always told me they were just tales to scare children. But as I stood there, the truth slammed into me like a tidal wave. The founders didn't just build the town, they sealed a curse. They had sacrificed something, someone, to keep the darkness contained. And now it wanted that sacrifice back. I felt the shadows wrap around my arms, pulling me closer to the fire. My mind raced, the whispers pounding in my skull, demanding I speak, demanding I confess. Logan! Jenna's voice was desperate, her eyes wide with fear. If you know something, you have to tell me. The fire roared, and the keeper raised its claw-like arms, the shadows responding to its call. I knew the truth would burn everything down, would destroy all of us if I spoke it aloud. But if I didn't, the darkness would take us all. With a deep breath, I looked into Jenna's eyes. The founders, they didn't seal the darkness. They made it. They bound the soul of a man, an innocent man, into the earth, using his pain to fuel the fire. Every Halloween, it's his anger, his suffering, that feeds the flames. Jenna's eyes widened, and the shadows surged again, pulling us closer to the fire's edge. The keeper's grin stretched wide, triumphant. And now, you are his replacement. The flames erupted, the shadows closing in, and I felt the ground open beneath me, a gaping maw that threatened to swallow me whole. The darkness tugged at my soul, and I screamed, knowing there was no escaping the fire. The ground opened wide beneath me, and I felt myself falling, pulled into the depths of the earth. The darkness roared like a living beast, swallowing the screams of the townspeople as they fell into the maw alongside me. It felt like I was falling forever, weightless and spinning, with nothing to grab onto but the thick, oily blackness clawing at my skin. I hit the ground with a jolt, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs. My ears rang, and the world around me was a swirling chaos of shadows and smoke. Jenna landed beside me, her eyes wide and panicked, but we didn't have time to react. The ground was alive, shifting beneath us like a serpent ready to strike. Roots lashed out, tangling around our ankles and wrists, pulling us deeper into the heart of the earth. The keeper's voice boomed from above, echoing off the cavern walls. You will take his place. One soul to anchor the fire. One soul to seal the darkness. Jenna struggled against the roots, her face twisted in fear. Logan, we can't let this happen. There has to be another way. But the roots tightened, pulling me closer to the fire at the center of the cavern. It wasn't a normal fire anymore. It was a pillar of black flames, twisting and writhing, filled with faces screaming in agony. I could see the souls of everyone who had ever been consumed, trapped within the inferno, their eyes begging for release. And then I saw him, the original sacrifice. He was bound to the flames, his arms stretched out like a crucifix, his body charred and broken. His eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, I felt his rage that had built up over centuries. kept alive by the town's lies and betrayals. The founders had sealed him here, using his suffering to power the bonfire and protect their own secrets. And now, it was my turn to take his place. Jenna screamed as the roots yanked her back, pulling her toward a chasm that opened up in the earth. She clawed at the ground, fighting to free herself, but the shadows wrapped tighter, dragging her closer to the edge. Her eyes met mine, and I could see the terror there. She knew, just as I did, that we were out of time. "Logan, don't let it take you," she cried. "Fight back." But as I struggled against the roots, I felt them tighten, binding me like iron shackles. The whispers grew louder, drowning out Jenna's voice. I could hear the voices of the past, the founders, the townspeople, and the souls of those who had been taken over the years, all crying out in a cacophony of guilt and horror. They had all fed the fire, and now it wanted me. The darkness coiled tighter, and my vision blurred. For a moment, I felt like giving in. It would be so easy to let the fire take me, to stop fighting and accept my fate. But then I saw Jenna's face, her hand reaching out to me, and something inside me snapped. "No," I growled through gritted teeth. "I won't let this happen again." With a surge of strength, I ripped my hand free from the roots and grabbed for Jenna's outstretched hand. The shadows hissed, the fire flaring angrily, but I pulled with everything I had, dragging her back from the edge. Her fingers clutched mine, and together we pulled ourselves to our feet, standing on the crumbling edge of the cavern. The keeper watched us, its eyes burning like twin black suns. "You cannot escape your fate. The fire demands sacrifice." I felt the shadows pulling at me, but I stood my ground. "We won't be your sacrifice," I shouted. "You want truth? Here it is. The fire ends tonight." Jenna's eyes widened. "Logan, what are you doing?" I didn't answer. Instead, I plunged my free hand into my pocket, feeling the cool touch of the lighter I always carried. My grandfather's old lighter, the one he used to light his cigarettes, the one he had handed down to me before he died. It had always felt like a small comfort, but now it felt like a weapon. I flicked it open, the flame sputtering to life. The fire hissed, and the shadows recoiled. "The only way to stop this is to burn everything," I said, my voice barely steady. "The fire isn't just here to punish, it's here to cleanse." Jenna's eyes widened in realization. "You mean everything?" I held the lighter above my head, the flame casting eerie shadows on the walls. "This place, the town, it all has to burn. It's the only way to set him free." Before she could respond, I tossed the lighter into the heart of the black flames. The fire roared as the lighter's tiny flame connected with it, and then everything erupted. The ground split open, and flames shot up, twisting through the roots, racing along the walls. The cavern shook violently, and the faces in the fire screamed as the blaze intensified. The keeper shrieked, its form melting into the flames, its eyes burning brighter before they flickered out. The shadows thrashed, clawing at us, but they were weakening, losing their grip. "Run!" I yelled, pulling Jenna with me as the cavern began to collapse. Rocks fell around us, and the tunnel we'd crawled through now glowed with fire, but it was our only way out. We sprinted, dodging falling stones and leaping over cracks that opened up beneath our feet. The tunnel was caving in, the heat unbearable, but I pushed forward, dragging Jenna behind me. The flames licked at our heels, and the ground trembled like it was trying to swallow us whole. My lungs burned, my legs felt like they were giving out, but I knew if we stopped, we'd be consumed. We burst out of the tunnel just as the cavern collapsed behind us, the force of the explosion knocking us off our feet. I landed hard, the breath knocked out of me, but I scrambled up, pulling Jenna to her feet. The fire was spreading through the woods, racing up the trees, and I could see the bonfire at the center of town growing, its flames turning from black to a brilliant, purifying white. The townspeople were scattering, fleeing the inferno, their eyes wide with terror. The fire wasn't just consuming the woods, It was devouring the town's secrets, its lies. The faces in the flames shifted, and I saw them, Mr. Gillis, Tommy, Kara, each one burning away, their shadows disintegrating as the fire tore through them. But there was no pain in their eyes now, just peace. Jenna and I stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as the fire roared higher, bright enough to light up the sky. The bonfire swelled, and then, in one blinding flash, it imploded, sucking the flames inward and sending a shockwave of light through the trees. When the light faded, all that remained was silence. The bonfire was gone. The woods were smoldering, but the shadows had vanished. The air felt clean, purged. I looked at Jenna, her eyes reflecting the glowing embers. "Is it over?" she whispered. I nodded, though a part of me knew that the scars of the past would never truly heal. "We set it free," I said. "The darkness, it's gone." But as we turned to leave the clearing, I noticed something. In the ashes where the bonfire once stood, a single flower had begun to bloom. It was small, white, and pure, and I felt a glimmer of hope rise in my chest. Maybe this time, the town could start over. Maybe this time, we could all be free.